To help figure out our always, sometimes, never problems, it may be helpful to draw a picture of what you're working with and see whether you can draw the figure in a different way that may make the statement sometimes true, or if you can tell from your picture that no matter how you draw it's going to be never true. So what I would try first is draw a picture. So they say we have a rhombus, so go ahead and just draw a rhombus any way you want to. And remember, what makes a rhombus is that we have four congruent sides. So let's label those four sides. We know those four sides are the same no matter what. And then there's some additional properties you know of a rhombus. And notice I could have drawn this rhombus differently. As long as my four sides were the same, I could have drawn the rhombus more tilted or less tilted. In fact, I could have even drawn the rhombus so it was a square. A square is a special type of rhombus. So I have some, I guess, wiggle room with how this rhombus looks. So they've labeled it QRST, so it doesn't matter how you order, just make sure you go around in order. So I'll go QRST around this way and see if this will help me determine whether these statements are sometimes, always, or never true. So first statement talks about angle Q and angle S. Well, in my diagram that I drew, no matter how I tilt this, angle Q and angle S are always going to be opposite angles. They're always going to be across from each other. And one of the properties we have of a rhombus and of a parallelogram is that opposite angles are congruent no matter what. So this statement is always going to be true. No matter how I draw that rhombus, those two angles will always be opposite of each other the way it was labeled, and opposite angles are always going to be congruent. But what about angle Q and angle R? Well, I can see in my diagram that angle Q and angle R are going to be angles that are next to each other, consecutive angles. And from the way that I drew it, I can see that those definitely are not congruent. Q is obtuse and R is acute. So I know this is not always true. However, remember, we have some wiggle room with how we drew this rhombus. So suppose I drew the rhombus such that all the sides were at right angles. It would still technically be a rhombus. I guess we could classify it more specifically as a square at this point, but it is still a rhombus because all four sides are still congruent. So if I drew the picture like that, the angles would be the same because they'd both be right angles. So here's a case of where we have a statement that's sometimes true. Depending on how we draw that rhombus, we could have angles Q and angle R equal to each other. Specifically, we'd say it's sometimes true. It would be true if the rhombus happened to be a square as well. But in general, that statement is sometimes true. Let's try another one. This time we have a square. So with a square, you don't have a lot of wiggle room with how that square looks. We know all four sides are going to be all four sides are going to be congruent, and we know we have four right angles. So like with the rhombus, we could kind of imagine tilting it more or tilting it less. You can't tilt the square because it has to be 90-degree angles. You can't make one side longer because they have to all be equal to each other. So we don't have as much room to move this shape around. So let's label the vertices C, D, E, F. It doesn't matter where you start as long as you go around in order. And let's check if these statements are sometimes, always, or never true. So first up, we're asked about segment CD and segment DE. And I can see that those are two sides of my square. Well, you guys know a square has always got four congruent sides. So that statement's going to be always true. No matter how you draw your square, all four sides are always going to be equal to each other. And then last up, it asks about angle F, which is down here. And they ask if angle F is going to be 60 degrees. Well, it can't be. I mean, it's a square. A square has 90-degree angles always, no matter what. So angle F is never going to be 60 degrees if you're working with a square. If it was, it wouldn't be a square anymore.